My husband stood at the head of our own dining table in front of my sister and his mother and told them I wasn't well enough to manage my father's money anymore. He said it gently. He said it with his hand over his heart. And then he slid a legal folder across the table toward me and asked me, in front of everyone, to sign control of my inheritance over to him before things get worse. I looked at that folder for a long moment. Then I set down a folder of my own. Mine was thicker. My name is Dana Cole. I'm 38 years old, and for the last 11 years, I've worked as a compliance auditor for a medical device company. My entire job is to prove what actually happened by what's written down, not by what people remember. I audit chains of custody. When a shipment or a signature or a batch record has a gap in it, I'm the person who finds the gap and refuses to look away from it. I've spent my whole career learning one thing above all others. Memory can be argued with, but a timestamp cannot. I'm telling you this now because it matters. My husband knew exactly what I did for a living, and he still thought he could rewrite my life and I wouldn't notice the edits. Before I tell you what was in my folder and what happened in the 60 seconds after I opened it, I need you to understand how a calm, careful woman ends up doubting her own mind, because that's the part nobody warns you about. If you've ever been made to question your own memory by the one person who stood to gain the most from you questioning it, drop the word ledger in the comments. That single word is the only reason I'm still standing here as myself. Stay with me, because the way this came apart is the whole point. Let me take you back 9 months. I've had an underactive thyroid since I was 31. If you've never dealt with it, here's all you need to know. I take one small pill every single morning, and as long as I take it, I'm completely fine. Sharp, steady, reliable. Which in my family and my career was practically my whole identity. But if that pill stops, my body forgets how to run itself. The fatigue comes first, a bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. Then the fog, where words I've used my whole life just slip out of reach mid-sentence. Then the small tremor in my hands, the cold, the tears that arrive for no reason at all. I know this because in the early days, before I was diagnosed, I lived it. I promised myself I'd never live it again. So when it started coming back last spring, I did what a careful person does. I blamed myself first. I told myself I was stressed. I'd just been shortlisted for Director of Quality, the biggest step of my career, and the pressure was real. So when I started losing words in meetings, I told myself it was nerves. When I forgot my sister's birthday for the first time in my life, I told myself I was overloaded. When my hands shook holding a coffee cup and my assistant asked if I was okay, I laughed it off and said I hadn't slept. And through all of it, there was Marcus, my husband of 9 years, so patient, so concerned, so very, very helpful. "Babe, you forgot again," he'd say softly, the way you'd talk to someone fragile. "That's the 3rd time this week. I'm getting worried about you." He started keeping a little log on his phone. He showed it to me once, all gentle. "I've just been noting the days you seem off so we can show the doctor. I'm on your side." Here's the thing about a man building a case against you. He doesn't look like a prosecutor. He looks like the only person who still believes in you. To understand why I didn't see it, you need to know this wasn't the first time Marcus had quietly resented what was mine. It was just the first time he did something about it. When my father died 2 years ago, he left the lake house and just over $400,000 to me. Not to us, to me, in my name, in a trust my dad set up specifically so it would stay mine. My father and Marcus never warmed to each other, and my dad, who read people for a living, made his feelings permanent in a legal document. Marcus smiled at the funeral and seethed for 2 years. "It's a little insulting," he told me once, That your own father didn't trust your husband. I told him it wasn't about him. He said, "Everything you own being separate from me sure feels like it's about me." There were smaller receipts too, the kind you only add up later. The time he forgot to tell me about the parent-teacher of our finances and moved money between accounts I didn't fully track. The way he'd correct my version of events in front of friends, casually, until I started deferring to his memory over my own. The evening he told my sister, laughing, that I'd gotten so scattered lately, and I sat there and let him say it because I was too tired to fight and half afraid he was right. That's the injustice that hides in plain sight. It isn't one big, cruel act. It's a slow, patient campaign to make you the unreliable narrator of your own life. The turn came on an ordinary Tuesday, at the pharmacy, over something almost too small to notice. I'd gone to pick up my thyroid refill. My prescription is on auto refill, 30 days at a time, same pharmacy for 6 years. And the pharmacist, a woman named Priya, who's filled my meds since before I was married, looked at her screen and said, "Oh good, you're staying right on schedule. Never a late refill. That's rare, honestly." I remember standing there and feeling something go very quiet inside me. Because I had been taking that pill every single morning. Marcus even filled my weekly organizer for me, the little plastic case with a compartment for each day. He'd started doing it months ago. "One less thing for you to worry about," he'd said. So I was picking up every refill, and I was taking a pill from that organizer every day. And my thyroid was crashing like I hadn't taken anything in months. Two things that both looked true. And they could not both be true. That contradiction is my whole profession in a single sentence. When the paperwork says the medicine went in, and the patient's body says the medicine never arrived, you don't shrug. You find the gap. And there was a gap in me the size of my entire life. The old me would have gone home and asked Marcus about it, and let him explain it away, and believed him, because believing him was easier than what I was starting to suspect. But something had shifted. I didn't ask Marcus anything. For the first time in months, I went quiet the way I go quiet at work. Right before I open a file nobody wants me to open. That night, after he was asleep, I took the pill for the next morning out of my organizer. And I took an unopened pill straight from the sealed pharmacy bottle. And I put them side by side under the kitchen light. They were not the same pill. Close, very close. Same rough size, same color family. Whoever picked the substitute had picked something that would pass a glance. But my whole career is refusing to glance. The pill from my organizer had no imprint code, just a faint line. My real medication has a specific stamp on it, always has. The one in my daily case was blank, inert, a nothing pill, dressed up to look like the thing keeping me alive as myself. I stood in my own kitchen at 2 a.m, holding the proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Someone had taken it from me, one morning at a time, and written it down in a phone as evidence that it was my fault. I want to be honest about what I felt, because it wasn't rage. Not yet. It was a strange, cold clarity, like the moment the audit stops being a suspicion and becomes a certainty. He didn't want me sick. He wanted me doubted. Sick was just the tool. Doubted was the goal. Because a doubted woman signs the folder. A doubted woman doesn't get the promotion. A doubted woman lets her husband help her manage the money her father was careful to keep out of his hands. And here's the mistake he made, the one I want every single one of you to remember. He built his entire plan on the belief that it would come down to his word against mine, his calm concern against my confusion. And in that fight, he'd already stacked the deck because he'd spent months making me look like the problem. But it was never going to be his word against mine. It was going to be his word against the record. The next morning, I didn't take anything from that organizer. I took one real pill from the sealed bottle, and I put both the organizer and the bottle in my bag, and I went to see Priya. I told her exactly what I'd found, the way I'd brief an investigator. No drama, just the discrepancy. She stopped smiling. She pulled the full dispensing history and printed it, every refill for the last 18 months, dates, quantities, the pharmacist who filled each one. She had the substitute pills examined and confirmed what I already knew, that they were not the medication that had been dispensed to me. She documented all of it and told me to keep the physical pills sealed and untouched, and not to confront anyone until I had the last piece. The last piece was my blood. I saw my doctor, told her the truth, and she ordered the lab work. When the results came back, the story wrote itself in numbers no one could argue with. My levels had collapsed to almost exactly where they'd been the year I was first diagnosed, as if I'd taken nothing at all for months. Right alongside a pharmacy record, proving I'd picked up my real medication like clockwork the entire time. Do you see it? That's the chain of custody. Proof the real medicine came into the house. Proof my body never received it. And the swapped, inert pills sitting in the exact case my husband, and only my husband, refilled. 3 documents, 1 conclusion. And not a single word of it depended on anyone believing me. I spent 1 week putting it together the way I'd build any case file. Clean, tabbed, dated. A copy with my lawyer, and a copy in a place Marcus would never think to look. Because the second rule of my job, right after the record is the truth, is keep a backup of everything. And then I did something I'm not proud of and would do again in a heartbeat. I waited. Because I knew Marcus. I knew the Concerned Husband Act was building toward a moment where he'd need witnesses to see how unwell I was, so that whatever he asked me to sign would look like mercy instead of theft. I just had to let him pick the room. He picked our dining room. He invited my sister Rachel and his mother, and a woman named Vanessa he'd been describing for months as just a work friend, though the record on that would sort itself out later too. He cooked, he poured wine, he waited until dessert, and then he stood at the head of the table, put his hand over his heart, and told the people I loved that he was so worried about me, that I'd been declining, that I'd become unreliable, and that he thought, for my own protection, it was time I let him take over managing my father's money before something goes wrong. He slid a folder across the table. Power of attorney. A trust amendment adding him as controller. All of it drawn up already, just waiting for the signature of a woman too foggy to read it closely. The room was quiet. Rachel wouldn't look at me. She half believed him. I could see it, and it broke something in me, but I understood it, because he'd spent months rehearsing them all for exactly this scene. I let him finish. I let the silence sit. And then I set my own folder on the table and opened it. Before I sign anything, I said, and my voice did not shake. I want everyone to see something I audited this week. I laid it out the way I'd lay out a finding. First, the pharmacy printout. 18 months of refills, every one on time. This is proof my medication came into this house, every single month, without fail. Then the lab results. This is proof that for the last several months, almost none of it reached my body. Then, last, I set the 2 small pills side by side on a white napkin in the middle of the table, under the light, the way I'd set them in my kitchen at 2 in the morning. The real one, with its stamp, the blank one, from the case Marcus filled with his own hands. This, I said, is what has been in my daily organizer instead of my medicine. It's inert. It does nothing. And there is exactly one person who has filled that organizer every week for the last 8 months. I looked at him. So did everyone else. Marcus's face did something I'd never seen it do. The concern slid off it like it had never been attached to anything. For one full second, there was nothing behind his eyes but calculation. A man reaching for the next lie and finding the drawer empty. His mother said his name like a question. Vanessa set down her wine very carefully and stared at the table. And my sister Rachel finally looked at me, and her hand came up over her mouth, and she started to cry. Because she understood in that instant what she'd almost signed her name to believing. The whole room went dead silent, and into that silence, I said the only sentence I'd planned in advance. You didn't make me sick, Marcus. You made me doubt myself, and you did it in writing. Here's what I want you to understand about what came next, because this is the part that actually matters, and it's the part people get wrong. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the wine. I didn't destroy him at that table. Revenge that feels good in the moment usually evaporates by morning. Revenge that lasts is documentation. I closed my folder, and the next morning, my lawyer filed. Tampering with another person's prescription medication is not a marital disagreement. It's a crime. The sealed, inert pills went to the authorities along with the pharmacy's sworn dispensing records and my physician's lab findings. And this time, it wasn't a fragile wife's story against a calm husband's concern. It was a chain of physical evidence with his fingerprints all over the one link only he controlled. The investigation didn't need me to be believed. It needed the record. And the record was already complete. The divorce told the same story in a different courtroom. The narrative he'd spent 2 years building, the unstable wife who couldn't be trusted with her father's money, detonated in his hands. Because the documentation didn't just clear me, it exposed exactly why he'd done it. The financial motive was written all over my father's trust, the trust my dad built specifically to keep this man's hands off what was mine. My father, it turned out, had audited Marcus years before I ever thought to. He just filed his findings in a legal document instead of a folder. The inheritance stayed mine, every dollar of it. The lake house is still mine, and I go there now. And it's quiet in a way my house hadn't been in years. And the promotion? I told my boss the truth, all of it, and showed her the same file. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said the thing I'll never forget. She said, "Dana, you were being chemically sabotaged into looking incompetent, and you still caught it, documented it, and built an unbreakable case. That's not a reason to doubt you for the director role. That's the entire job description. I start as director of quality next month. I won't pretend it all healed clean. It didn't. My sister Rachel came to me weeks later, and she couldn't stop apologizing. She'd half believed him. She'd sat at that table ready to watch me sign my life away and told herself it was for my own good. I should have known you, she said, crying. I've known you my whole life, and I let him tell me who you were. I forgave Rachel. She was a good person who got worked, the same way I did, by a man who was very good at his job. Being fooled by a liar is not the same as being the liar. Marcus never apologized. Not once. In the one conversation we had through lawyers, he didn't say he was sorry. He said I'd overreacted to a misunderstanding. A man who counted out inert pills into my daily case every Sunday morning for 8 months called it a misunderstanding. I didn't argue. I've learned there's no point auditing someone who's decided the record is the thing that's wrong. He doesn't get my forgiveness. And honestly, he doesn't need it. He needs the thing the record already gave him, which is consequences. People ask if I'm bitter now. I'm not. I'm clear. There's a difference, and it took me almost losing my own mind to learn it. I didn't become cold. I became clear. I keep one of those 2 pills in a small case on my desk now, the blank, inert one, right where I'll see it every morning when I take the real one. Not to stay angry, to stay awake. Because a record doesn't get tired, and a record doesn't second-guess itself, and that is exactly why they trust it, and exactly why he was afraid of it. Love that needs you smaller isn't love, it's inventory, and I refuse to ever be counted again. So let me ask you, before you go, if you'd been at that table, and it was your word against a calm, concerned spouse holding a folder, would you have been able to prove you were still yourself? Would you have kept the receipts? Be honest. If you've ever been made to doubt your own memory by someone who benefited from your doubt, drop the word ledger in the comments. I read them, and I want to know I'm not the only one who learned to keep the file. Quick note before you go. This is an original dramatized story written for this channel. The names, characters, and events are fictional, and any resemblance to real people is coincidental. It's here to make you feel something, and maybe to make you a little harder to fool. If it did, subscribe, because I post a new one every week, and the next person who tries to rewrite your life should have to get past the record first. Because in the end, they can argue with your memory all day long. They just can't argue with the log.